somewhere that they would just as soon forget.
10:50, 10 minutes before the hour. Here on Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950, the voice of Minnesota. And online, DougPagittRadio.com, and also at Facebook.com/Doug Pagitt Radio. The fan page over there. Hey, the fan page is a great way for you to stay in touch. You can see a list of upcoming guests that are going to be on the show. You can give me some comments, all the rest of that. So if you're into that Facebook thing, and I sure hope that you are, join us over there. In fact, this hour brought to you by Jopa Productions, production company that I own. That's going to be offering a boot camp for social media, specially designed for those who work in churches, pastors, and the like. So if you've got a pastor around that you think needs to be into that social media thing, head on over to facebook.com/Jopa Productions, J-O-P-A Productions. You can get the info on that, this boot camp for pastors going on there. Hey, those of you who listen online, you don't to the podcast, you don't always hear all the commercials, so you don't get the little fun that we get here, the commercials of Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950 on Sunday mornings, brought to you by the Smitten Kitten. Love it. Religious radio that's not quite right. I try to do a little segment here in the show called Cripes. Come on, you got to be kidding me. It's my little take on the things in the world that kind of make me smirk and make me say, Cripes. So I guess that kind of gives me the Norwegian thing, even though I'm not Norwegian at all. But the Cripes that come on, you got to be kidding me. So the Cripes today actually is one that's slightly good news. My Cripes of the day. I think it's good news, and that is this whole business about them finding water on the moon. Grover, water on the moon. Growing up, the thing that I heard over and over and over about what makes the Earth different from the rest of all the other galactic entities was that we had a water source. I mean, that was it, right? I mean, that we could support life and human life, and that the other places can't do it. And now, as it turns out, there's water on the moon.
How long have we really known this? Are we just trying to get more money for NASA right now?
Okay.
We couldn't figure this out 40 years ago? Or?
Okay, Mr. Skeptic, that's exactly my Cripes of the day. When I was a kid, I grew up, so I'm born in 1966, so I grew up, I'm 6 years old in 72, and, there's all this NASA lunar stuff. I'm watching I Dream of Jeannie, and that's about astronauts, and astronauts are a big deal, and I'm drinking Tang, right? And that's the drink of the astronauts, and to the moon, and all this stuff is a big deal. Then it sort of goes away, like, it's just the moon. What good's that? That's not even as dusty as we thought. Those big moon boots that they had. They had those moon boots because they thought when they got there they were going to sink down. So it's sort of like, the moon's really not all that exciting after all. Yeah, well, what we've been doing for the last 40 years, it turns out there's water on the moon. And some people knew it, right? That's why they run these experiments. So about a month ago, they went crashing this
$79 million rocket into the
moon. $79 million rocket that, they'd used up. The rocket was down. They're like, hey, what are we going to do with that rocket? And they're like, here's what we need to do. We need to find out if that crater down there actually has water in it, which I think is fascinating that they do this in the first place. So they direct it so that it'll fly into and smash into a crater and kick up a bunch of dust. I mean, talk about a kid-like experiment, Let's see if we can just bash some water out of the ground. And then we'll send another, rocket in there that's going to be going bad soon with a detector on it and can see if there's any water. Well, it turns out lots of water. A lot of water on the moon. What have we been doing for 40 years? I'm with you. Cripes. I mean, now all of a sudden it's like, hey, maybe people could live on the moon if there's a water source, and hey, maybe there's a place for us to actually work on some new fuels that could make it a staging station to get it out. Well, what have we been doing for the last 40 years? Diddle-dinking around. We should have been on the moon having cold drinks of water or something. It just messes with everything. See, here's why people get skeptical, and here's one of the reasons why people don't trust in the world that we live in when you're in an informed world, is because everything that you know, everything that people have told you, all the stuff that you're supposed to assume is the way that it is, you realize hang in there for a while, and maybe it won't be that way. So, in fact, next week we're going to have an author on who's written a book called On Certainty on how it is that we form these senses of everything being absolutely that way when it's not. But anyway, this Cripes kind of gets me on this one, that there's water on the moon. I mean, it's a good thing, but the Cripes comes into what have we been doing for the last 40 years? Not spending our time going to the moon, apparently. you know? And then NASA's like out of money, right? And now they're like, okay, maybe by 2020 we could get there. You know, in the last presidential administration kicks in $100 billion, and it's like, well, that's not nearly enough.
We didn't want to go back in the 80s when they had the money to do it.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, the fact that we've abandoned space exploration for the most part in this country, like we're gonna we have people living in a space station, which is a very big deal, but we don't have any way to get there anymore. So in the United States, we're gonna have to hitch a ride to get to the space station. It's just
Didn't we actually get tipped off on the water thing by India?
Is that true? Do you know that?
Like
Indian astronomers were saying, hey, seriously, there's water on the moon.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe it's because in this country we've been told over and over since I was a kid, there ain't no water on the moon. There's nothing there. It's just a big. I mean, we don't even know, right? I mean, most of the stuff. This is what there's this book that I read a summer ago and then listened to again on the audiobooks called A Brief History of Nearly Everything, and it's a terrific book, and it basically, highlights a number of developments in science and a brief history of all the things in science. And one of the major points of the book is what we don't know is very little, and what we're sure we know probably shouldn't be so sure of. Like, it's a fabulous time to be alive. Let's just sort of keep it rolling. I mean, and that's one of the views that I have on religion and everything else, is that it's supposed to be an expanding conversation, not a limiting one. So water on the moon earns the Cripes of this week. Wasted. The Come On, speaking of wasted, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but apparently in June, U2 is coming to Minnesota to play at TCF Stadium at the University of Minnesota campus. They're rolling that big old egomaniac tour right here into town, charging people $100 a ticket, and they're going to put like 40,000 people in there. It's just obesity. It's just grotesque. It's just too much. Yeah, I know I earn no sympathy on this. I earn no sympathy at all from people who listen, because there's millions and millions of people who adore these four fellas, especially that Paul guy, and they'll just flock in and they'll drop $100, and then he'll get all preachy about how we're supposed to solve the problems in the world and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, they're running this completely just over the top. I'm going to get grief about that later today, so I won't say anything more about it. But those of you who wanted to know, U2 is coming to Minnesota, TCF Stadium, in June. Now we're going to have to hear about that for the next 6 months. All the people being excited about going. Here's my You Gotta Be Kidding Me. I was in a doctor's office this week with my son. I was waiting for a doctor's appointment where we had to wait an hour and a half to get in to see the doctor because, they can't seem to manage. Why do you trust a surgeon? They can't seem to manage their desk. But anyway, waited for an hour and a half to get in for a follow-up visit on a surgery. And a nurse came walking out through the lobby and heading outside, and she was going out to a smoke break. The You Gotta Be Kidding Me comes from the fact of her being pregnant. Not only is she a nurse smoking, she's pregnant. And then one of the people in the waiting room said to her, they saw she had cigarettes in her hand, and they said to her, "Hey, would you have one of those that I could have?" And you know what she said? "Nope, it's my last one." Not only is she a smoking nurse, she's pregnant, and she won't share the last one. You gotta be kidding me. Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950. Having a little fun. We'll be back after the break.